Can I get the attention of those of you who are in New Haven? Okay. All right. Okay. So my name is Peter Young. I'm a Yale class of 1974. Can everyone here in New Haven?
Yeah.
Okay, terrific. Okay, just want to make sure.
I think it's done for the year.
So Yale class of 74, Brantford College. And I'm very pleased to welcome you to the 9th in this series of panel webinars on careers after Yale. This series focuses on providing students and alumni with candid, helpful views of different professions via panels of successful practitioners in each field. Today we're going to focus on the medical profession, which we know is of great interest to Yale students. And the overall concept has been, of this whole program, is really to target professions that both Yalees pursue in large and small numbers, but in particular professions where there are numerous myths and misconceptions about how you get there and what it's like once you get there. I was telling people, if all professions were exactly the way they were on television, lawyers would solve cases every 30 minutes, or at least before each commercial, and doctors would solve literally every case, and sometimes if they're house, they would be grumpy about it. So, and I also comment before to someone that everyone seems to want to go into forensic science because they watch NCIS and Bones, and then they don't realize that in fact it's not nearly as sexy as it looks like on television. So over the first 8 of these panels, we've had 1,100 students participate. We featured the legal profession twice, investment banking twice, medical once, entrepreneurism, drama and film, and consulting. And this academic year, we are featuring the medical profession today. And those of you interested in education, we have a panel on November 11th with some very terrific panelists. And then after the new year, we're going to focus on government nonprofits and then investing, i.e. private equity, venture capital, and fund management. So you see, we're trying to hit a variety of professions that Yaleys are interested in, but in particular, all of these are professions where, believe me, there are a lot of myths and misconceptions. So this event is somewhat unique in that we have 3 simultaneous venues. We have a meeting room here in New York City. There are a number of you up at room 116 at William Harkness Hall at Yale. And then there are a large number of people who are participating by streaming video and an audio conference call. Now, each of these panels, the panelists have, their location is varied. Sometimes we've had 2 at Yale, 2 here, sometimes 4 here, sometimes a whole mixture. Of one case, entrepreneurism, all of the panelists were up in New Haven. But the beauty of the way this works is essentially whether the easiest place is New Haven or the easiest place is New York, or we actually have had people dial in streaming video from China. It allows anyone who wants to participate to participate. For this particular panel, we had, as of about an hour ago, 301 people who registered, and across 3 venues, 12 here in New York, 79 at Yale, and 210 via the streaming video. So I want to note also, which is very interesting, that out of those who registered, students, 8 at least indicated they're currently at the Yale Medical School, 3 have indicated that they're currently at the School of Public Health, and 1 is from the School of Management, and 1 is a PhD candidate. By the way, I hope as a result of this, we don't have anyone deciding to drop out of Yale Medical School. Right? I also want to introduce Kristen McJunkins of the Yale Undergraduate Career Services. Kristen, are you there?
Hi.
Okay, great. And Kristen is going to quarterback the Yale location, and when we get to the Q&A, she'll make sure that it's coordinated from that side. But before I introduce the speakers, I want to just thank a couple of people and organizations. This is really a collaborative effort on the part of a number of organizations. First, I'd like to thank Elaine Mazzarella and Kristen McJunkins of the Yale Undergraduate Career Services. Steve Bloom and Elizabeth Rocher of the AYA, Savina Dahl of the Asian American Cultural Center, Trish Takemoto, who's actually here from the Asian Association of Asian American Yale Alumni, Mai Lu of the Yale Alumni Association of New York, and Rachel Tobin of the Junior Class Council. But I also want to thank Tom Melvin of my firm, Young Partners, who is manning the streaming video system over there. And this is really an event that many organizations help to plan and to market. And last, I'd like to give some special thanks to Paul Weiss, who has graciously provided the use of this meeting room here in New York and their video conferencing equipment. Many of you know that Paul Weiss is a firm of more than 700 lawyers and whose long-standing clients include many of the largest publicly and privately held companies and financial institutions around the world. In fact, Les Fagan, who is a partner of this firm, is a Yale graduate, and in fact, we managed to get him to be a panelist on the legal panel, so he's been very, very helpful. Last, why is there a need for this event? You know, to be honest, we all know that Yale students are smart and resourceful, and both Yale students and graduates, but really, the real issue is that no matter how smart you are, the issue is how do you get accurate and candid information, right? Because information about law and so forth, there aren't books that say what it's like to be a lawyer or a doctor and so forth, right? So we can't help you in these panels figure yourself out, right? That's something that you have to do about what you like, what you feel you're good at or not good at. But our hope is that these series of career panels will help you get candid, credible views so that you can make intelligent choices about your careers. I can't tell you how many people I know who went to law school and worked for a law firm for 2 years and then just suddenly realized that it wasn't right for them. And then some change and some end up saying, well, I've spent 5 years, so it's too late to change, and that's a sad outcome. For this event, I'd like to first introduce the panelists, and then I'm going to guide the panelists through 5 topics that were outlined in the invitation that you all responded to. And then we're going to make sure there's time at the end for all of you to ask questions. If you're participating by the streaming video or the conference call, it's only broadcast, so you can't ask questions via the video or the call. But we'd like you to send your questions to yalecareerpanels@gmail.com, and we'll be monitoring the emails here. And those of you who are either here in New York or at Yale, just raise your hand and we'll call on you. We do expect to end at 5:30, but all of the panelists here have graciously agreed to stay on for about half an hour to answer questions of anyone here who would like to ask them questions. So the 4 panelists are Steve Dolgen, to my far left. He is a professor of surgery and pediatrics at the Hofstra North Shore LIJ School of Medicine, a Yale graduate in 1973. Dr. Nathan Case, he's a professor, Department of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Sciences, and former dean at the Mount Sinai School of Medicine, and a former Yale Medical School professor. Esther Knapp is a doctor. She's a fellow in pediatric and hematology oncology at the Children's Hospital at Montefiore, and she's a Yale graduate 2003. And she was a panelist before, and it was wonderful because she's been out 5 or 6 years, and she also can tell you a little, 10 years, I'm sorry, can give some perspectives about being a woman doctor. And last, we have John Lee, who is an assistant professor of radiology at the NYU School of Medicine, and also of radiology at NYU Cancer Institute, and an attending radiologist at the Bellevue Hospital and Gouverneur Healthcare Services. She graduated from Yale 1991 and also from the Yale Medical School. I'll serve as a moderator, and since the biographies of our panelists are contained in the invitation, I won't go through them at this stage. But what I'm very pleased is we have 4 doctors who practice different types of medicine, at different stages of their career, different diversity of age, and this is very important, so you get perspectives from different, a variety of doctors. Also, I have to tell you that all four, I know, love their profession. And so it's going to be very hard for them, but they have promised me that they're going to be candid and to talk about not only the joys, but also the challenges. Now we may take a vote at the end and see which of the panelists you think is most like the character in House, and which one is the most likely the main character in Royal Pains, the concierge doctor in the Hamptons, and we'll see who wins what vote. So let's proceed through the first 5 topics, and let's just start out by and I'll ask each of you, and maybe we'll start with you, and just say, what are the good things, and also what are the bad things happening to the profession of being a doctor? Right?
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to serve on the panel. This is really a pleasure and such a privilege. Before I even start, though, I just want to point out that these are 4 perspectives, and as multifaceted as our perspectives will be over the course of the session, realize they're 4. And there are lots and lots of other doctors out there and lots of other healthcare professionals, period. We're not just limiting. We happen to be MDs, but I just want to throw out there that there are lots of ways to be in the healthcare profession and a lot of ways to be doctors too. So I just want you to always be asking every single person you meet. I really was thinking I was going to be a psychiatrist first because I just have this really intense curiosity about people. So as part of your journey and as part of your self analysis, you want to make sure that you're really taking advantage of every single person who happens across your path, because their experience is something that you can draw from for good or for bad. Now, I also want to point out that these questions, one question that I did ask Peter that he didn't answer is, could I pass on any of the questions?
Yes. Yeah, you can.
So now he said that we can. I think the only thing that I can really say about this first question about which direction is the profession heading is, I think I can really only comment on radiology, and perhaps that's how we're meant to complement each other. I am thrilled to be a radiologist. Radiology is one of those fields that you may or may not gain early appreciation for, how extensive our impact is and our influence. If you don't have radiologists in your immediate family or your social circle, you may not ever really know what a radiologist does until you need it. And maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is something that we're trying to change in our field to make sure that medical students are getting early appreciation for just how varied radiology can be in its parts. And for that matter, when we talk about being a doctor, remember there's so many ways to be a doctor, so you can definitely find your niche. Don't be thinking narrowly just based on what we say. Generally, though, to answer the question, we're excited in radiology. It continues to be a very important field. It's never going to go away. My husband, who happens to be a corporate litigator, was joking that maybe we will become extinct because all radiology studies can be read remotely from India. But that's really not going to happen, because we are very much partners to our clinicians, and we need to be part of the scene as well, and to be immediately accessible. In addition, there are a lot of radiology subspecialties that very much put us in direct and intense and ongoing interactions with our patients directly, so that already is a myth that busted right there, that there are fields within radiology that very much make you remember that you're a doctor first and a radiologist second. So for us, we are very optimistic in the way that our field is heading. We definitely are trying to emphasize the concept of value added, and also understanding and helping others understand how we are relevant and increasing our profile. But the essence of what we do will never ever be not important. And my particular subspecialty within radiology is a breast radiologist. I can certainly go into that in detail with any of you, but it's something that I'm very, very much excited about, and that certainly isn't going to go away.
Well, let's turn to Esther, but I will say, and all of you now, I guess, realize that every day we're reading about Obamacare, the problem and so forth. Mm-hmm. I have to say that there's structural things that are happening to the entire healthcare industry that are going to change things good and bad, right? Yes. And so that's one of the things you should really make sure you understand, is that the medical profession 10 years ago is different from what it is today. It's going to be different, will be 10 years from now. And you got to really, as they say, unless you plan to have a 2-year career, you better really understand where things are going to head at 10 or 20 years ahead. Go ahead.
I'm Esther Knapp. I think in some ways I'm a little less equipped to speak to where medicine has been in the past and where, in relation to that, where it's going in the future, because obviously I'm more junior compared to our other doctors here on the panel. So I won't dwell too much on how it has changed in the past few decades, because that's not part of my experience. But in terms of where medicine is going in the future, I do think there are going to be a lot of changes, whether they're of the legal, political variety or otherwise. And some of the changes that I think are going to have a positive impact, I think there's a lot more emphasis these days on taking into account not just, in the first few years of medical school you study anatomy and physiology and X, Y, and Z, and these are the tests you have to take and the steps you have to pass. And I think there's more of an appreciation starting in medical school and maybe even earlier of what it means to be a doctor as sort of a broader concept, and incorporating things like humanism and ethics. And ethics happens to be an interest of mine, and I know that when I was in medical school, it was one of the courses I took, but it was very short. It was nobody really cared about it. You didn't really have to go. Nobody showed up, and they've changed it at my medical school. They've changed it a lot since then. I'm actually helping to teach that class now, so it's very exciting to see how that has changed, and I do think it reflects overall this broader trend to think more about what it means to be a doctor holistically.
Do you on this ethics thing, do you think all of the pressures related to reimbursement and all these things which have changed, for example, has made it very difficult for doctors to have their own individual practice anymore, right, because of the costs and so forth. But do you think some of these things that relate to reimbursement and how doctors are paid are making the ethical issue tougher for doctors?
I think in some ways it probably is for some people. I mean, I don't know that my personal experience has a lot to do with that. I'm a pediatrician. I'll always be in academics as a hematologist, oncologist. I'll never really have a private practice, and so there won't really be incentive, I think, for me to do anything differently because of reimbursements. But I did talk to a friend who's an ophthalmologist, and she said, yeah, you're getting less money per procedure, but honestly, all we're going to do is we're just going to do more of them. So I do think that is a challenge that the field faces.
Dr. Case, good and bad?
Let's see. Good, unquestionably, if the mission of medicine is to provide care to the most people, then I think ACA is a huge step forward. It is clearly, however, a major challenge to the concept of a one-on-one contact between physician and patient. It hinges, frankly, on a team of caregivers. Hopefully the physician will have a major part in structuring that aggregate, but there will be a medical home where, for the most part, patients, happily from all sites and all strata of our society, will have access probably to nurses, nurse practitioners, and very brief, if any, contacts with physicians. So that would be probably the trade-off bad, but again, if mission is treat and care for patients, then it's a huge success. Despite all the pitfalls and difficulties, it will be repaired, and hopefully we're on the road to single payer status, and the politics will evaporate. I'm old enough to know that might be beyond my age limit. I don't buy wine that's drinkable in 20s. But I think there are many other very positive things, aside from maximizing care to the most people. I think the care will change away from devoting all of our money and all of our talents to chronic illness. Not that we will depart from that serious challenge and necessary to solve or palliate. I think we will have, under ACA, and because it's the right thing, a huge new emphasis on prevention. And that prevention is not discipline related. The bulk of you, I hope, will enter medicine and go on into primary care type activities, pediatrics, family medicine, internal medicine, perhaps obstetrics. What you will have is the challenge to prevent disease from emerging. And the real good beauty of where we are is the science now of epigenetics and proteomics that forget the personalized medicine. I think we're really far away from that with respect to GWAS, these huge programs that are costly and haven't yielded a great deal. But there are epigenetic insights and proteomic insights that really will indicate points of not only access, susceptibility to modification, surely stabilization, if not reversal. It's just very clear. In the United States today, and I hate to say it, I'm a pedant, but New England Journal of Medicine, perhaps early 2012, Berry et al. Looked at 50 years of national health examination results. 50 or 60 or 70,000 individuals. It turns out that that 2/3 of the population between 20 and 80 have 2 or more risk factors that will lead to early demise and chronic disability. And that's smoking, that's dyslipidemia, hypertension, and a glucose intolerance. Those are matters that are silent in their evolution, and our task and joy will be to scrutinize those early evolving events and catch the thing before it becomes clinically obvious. So there are some bads and some goods, but the outlook is positive.
Dr. Dolger? Peter? The good is that it puts medical career puts meaning in your life. It's so founded in the ethical precept, and you use your mental energies to gain insight into helping fellow human beings who are suffering. It's a time-honored precept, and the psychic remuneration is incalculable, and it's worth more than adding a decimal point to your income. And I'm saying all this cognizant that I'm a well-remunerated surgeon, feeling badly for Esther, who's a struggling fellow in pediatric hematology. But the fact is that ain't none of us starving, and the rewards that you get from patients whom you help, the danger is they think you're a deity, and you actually aren't. Now the bad is that what Jian Lee does, imaging and interpreting imaging, is so outstripping our knowledge of the natural history of the disease. The technology is influence on the medical practice is from the beginning of the day to the end of the day in every way you can imagine. How do young people gain access to information? And how somebody calls me at 2 in the morning now about a patient and sends me a photograph. And they already have read the latest article about it before I even wake up from my slumbers. But one of the areas, as a good example, where technology has really gone very far is in modern imaging. So I now have a pregnant woman, people say pregnant couple, which I don't actually buy based on my knowledge. A pregnant woman with some significant other perhaps with her, and the fetus has been imaged. It's been imaged. And they're coming to me to tell them what to do, or to get some advice about the malformation that's evident. And we don't know the natural history of some of these malformations when they're seen in utero. But so what does that mean? That's the crux of clinical decision-making, which is we're expected to give advice to people when we don't have all the facts necessary to be certain about it. So Galileo said that the book of nature was written in the language of science, which is numbers. And I think you figured out when you were very young that medicine wasn't all that mathematical or predictable. Right. I think you did, right. Because Peter is my friend. And he was looking when he was youthful about career opportunities. And one of the cruxes of clinical medicine is the uncertainty. And if you cannot deal with that kind of clinical thinking, you can still go into medicine like Dr. Lee was saying, but you might want to fix the variables, look at unicellular organisms, study molecular biology. If you're going to be in the clinical arena, you have to be fairly comfortable with uncertainty.
Yeah.
And
putting it all together.
So it's safe to say you're not going to win the vote about being housed, because house solves every medical problem, right?
You like to talk about the TV characters. I'm outdated. I always want to be Ben Casey. Ben Casey had ripped biceps, and he was a surgeon. And the nurses, who were all female, they got faint when he walked by.
So now we know the real reason why you became a doctor, right?
The real reason I became a doctor is because my father was a hero in my community, because he was a dedicated physician.
Ditto.
And I became a doctor because my father was a lawyer, so.
So let's go to the next question, which is, this is voluntary, so it's up to each panelist to decide whether they want to answer. What are the myths versus the realities? From a professional, I don't want to talk about treatments or therapies, I mean in terms of being a doctor. So, and I open it up to anyone, but a 1 minute comment, voluntary, about what you see as a myth that probably is, seen by the people in the audience versus what the reality is, good or bad, right?
So I alluded to one already. I think is worth repeating about radiologists. The funny thing is, when I was in medical school, I actually specifically chose not to pursue radiology initially, because there were some upperclassmen who were being kind of candid about saying that they were going into radiology because they didn't want to deal with patients, they wanted to wear nice clothes to work. And I remember really being put off by that. I am happy to say that it turns out that the world of radiology is much more compassionate than that, very much patient-focused. But what makes it special, of course, is that we're interpreting imaging. But what makes my particular subspecialty within radiology so gratifying is that direct patient interaction. And I could go on and on about my particular
what's the myth,
but
and
I won't.
what's a myth
So
versus
the myth
reality?
has to do with the fact that radiologists are perhaps perceived as being doctors who don't interact with patients at all, and who are just looking for an easy 9 to 3 o'clock job. And that's not true at all. So maybe I'll stop there.
Peter, I would like you to say what you think is a myth, because I don't think we all actually know what the myths are about doctoring so well. Gion's obviously 100% right about radiology, but I think you have something in mind.
No, I don't have any mind, because I'm not the expert about being a doctor.
No, but you know what the myths are.
Let me put a finer point on that,
Yeah, all right,
Steve.
okay.
The myth is that you can do brain surgery in the emergency room. Those are absurdities. But I'd rather say, what are the misimpressions?
Yeah, same thing.
And I think there are at least two. One's Dr. Dolgen has pointed out, is that biology is variable and unpredictable. And that's seen every day in clinical medicine. But it's also true that one can be seriously motivated out of altruism to heal everyone and everything. And that it comes as a rather stark surprise that there are elements of poverty, of willful abuse, etc., recidivism, that challenge every motivated, well-meaning, altruistic physician. And it ain't easy to restrain yourself from condemning that bad action because you've been trying so hard to help. That's, I think, something anyone, regardless of specialty, and I think it would be wrong for the pre-meds to make an early decision now and what direction to take in terms of specialty. That must evolve with experience. But in every specialty, there will be the reality, the realization that there are limits to your knowledge, limits to your generous, pragmatic commitment 24/7, and just be aware of it. That is a real misapprehension. And we see very serious outcomes as a result of that. And probably one of the reasons, preempting maybe one of your next questions, why there might be dissatisfaction and burnout.
You know, I do want to comment, though, on something that you said, Steve, and that is, you made the point that there's a perception somehow that doctors can diagnose everything and solve all problems. And I went through a personal experience very recently. As you know, my father, at age 93 and a half, passed away about a month ago. And he had a heart attack. And he went through a process in the hospital for a week where they were desperately trying to figure out whether he could be revived and so forth. And that was a real reality. That was a real reality for me because they were trying very hard. They were using every test. They had different theories they were working on, but truly they were not in a real position to know whether he could be revived or not, because there's just a very nature, you can't diagnose everything and you can't know everything. And to me, I had both the respect for the doctors who treated him, but also a reality that there are limits to what they can do, right? You know?
Yeah, because none of us are getting out of here alive. And that's, so if the goal of the medical profession is to, goal of the medical profession is to, you have to win against death and against disease. We're all born losers. And that's an inherent issue for you all thinking about the career to think about. As an aside, your father left quite a legacy with you and Alice and Nancy.
Can I don't mean to hog the panel.
Oh, no, please do.
Though I probably will, and I apologize.
I'm very appreciative.
What you've just described is one of the misapprehensions of our current healthcare system and the expectations. There must be an acknowledgement on the part of the physician, caregiver, and the patient's family that there is a limit to what can be done to preserve life for a week, a month, however valuable that content might be, okay? I happen to be a very strong advocate because my late dear wife was the recipient of one of the most gifted pair of geriatricians who specialized in palliative care. And palliative care acknowledges that there are limits to the physician's ability to reverse relentless, deadly disease. But there is a position of physicians to assist that individual and her family in understanding the process, supporting each other together in making those final days not a calamity for the finance of the family, not change the great sad bereavement that occurs, but at least to understand the process and orient to that reality. And it's essential that we get off the notion that another test, another value imaging, another whatever is going to make a darn bit of difference to the health and welfare of that patient or the family.
I totally agree with you, and I went through that at St. Barnabas, the
Sure.
hospital, and they did a fantastic job.
Bingo.
They came to the realization at one point that it was hopeless, they could keep testing, and they did a wonderful job of
Yeah.
helping us understand that and make the right
Yeah.
decision. So there's a side of it which is not technical of being a doctor, and that I think is very important to know. And I
But
think
it's
that's
the
why-
art.
But it is the
Art
art of working with people.
So in a similar vein, sorry.
No, no.
To echo some of what Dr. Case was just saying, I deal with that same issue often, and in my practice, it's pediatric patients, it's children who are dying. I deal with children with blood disorders and cancer, and oftentimes this situation does come up where you feel like, I'm the doctor, I'm trying to help your child, aren't we all in this together, don't we all want the same thing, don't we all want, to cure your child if that's possible, and in the case that it's not possible, which sometimes it's not, we at least want to make sure he or she is comfortable and has every form of support possible. And you would think that that would be a situation in which everyone could sort of agree to do what's best, and surprisingly, or not so surprisingly, often, this is an unbelievably stressful time for families, and they often react in ways that don't seem rational. I've never been in that position of having a dying child, thankfully, and I don't know what that's like, but people react in ways that boggle the mind, and they get very angry, and they get very confrontational, or they get sad, or they're in denial. I mean, any number of reactions is possible, and there's nothing worse, I think, than going into a profession because you want to help people, and then finding yourself in conflict with parents or with patients, and finding yourself, I think as a doctor you need to be prepared for these situations. You find yourself being accused of the most terrible things. You don't care about my child, all you want to do is make money or go home, neither of which you should. I mean, if that's what you want, don't go into pediatric oncology. And it's really frustrating because you think, wait a minute, I went into this because I want to make a positive change, and all of a sudden we're in this argument and things are getting ugly. And I mean, I've seen it all. I've been cursed at, I've had to call security, I've been accused of lying, or all sorts of things, and that's not the norm, but just realize that though there will be, the vast majority of encounters will be ones where people will be immensely grateful, and that there's no substitute for that. That's unbelievably rewarding, and that will sustain you even on the bad days. But there will be bad days where you'll go home and you'll feel like absolute you know what, and your attending yelled at you, and the family yelled at you, and the patient still died, and those days will happen. So it's a long road.
I have one advantage, Esther, is that I'm older, because you're absolutely right. Dr. Case says you just illustrated what he was talking about late at night when somebody's blaming you and accusing you of things and you're exhausted. That's when your humanism and ethics are really tested. But counterpoint is that all I have to do is open my email, and I get pictures of people who I operated on when they were babies, and they're on the top of the world, and they're crediting me for that. And that's a good bang for the buck.
Let's switch to our next question, which is, let's face it, people are different, and every profession that we all know can be a good fit or a bad fit for an individual. And I think you said I should comment about my situation. I'll do it briefly, because I'm a good example of a realization that I was going to not be happy as a doctor. I mean, I was a physics and math major at Yale. I was pre-med, And being from an Asian family, of course, they said there are two things: you should either be a PhD professor or a doctor. Anything else?
Oh, I thought it was doctor or lawyer. That's
No,
what I
no,
got.
well, they said so. They said you either have to be a doctor, but in the middle of, at the end of my sophomore year, I had the privilege of being, following two doctors around for the summer. And at the end of the summer, they said, you'd be a very good doctor, but I don't think it's right for you. I think you would really, you wouldn't like the lifestyle. You wouldn't want to, you probably go into a specialization like surgery. You're not the kind of person who would want to, study for that long and so forth. And it was an interesting thing. So for me, I made the right decision for myself not to be a doctor. But this profession, medical profession, it's suited for some people and not others. So I will ask the panelists to say, from your experience, because you know people who are happy, you know people who, went to medical school but quit or whatever. What are the characteristics of people who tend to do well and are happy versus, aren't appropriate, right, for one reason or another, by personality or skills or so forth. So let me ask any one of you, Dr. Case, do you want to comment? You've seen many from your position who have been both happy, unhappy, successful,
indeed.
unsuccessful,
Yes,
right?
indeed.
As a dean, right?
Yeah. It's a very difficult question to answer, not to ask. I think the people that seem to be happiest as physicians have made peace with some of the challenges that I've already pointed out. But I think that at the heart of that peace is, and God, the psychology majors out there are going to snicker, but I do believe that Maslow's themes of self-mastery and self-authorship, self-knowledge, the ability to accept reality with equanimity, even in adversity, those are the happiest people. The least happy are the guys that think they were going to make a lot of money and don't, or adored and are not. Perhaps the happiest of those that in that first category that I cited are the ones who can communicate lucidly, cogently, but also who can listen, and listen with appreciation and respect, and have executive competence to work out a plan, and not only to do it, but to make sure it gets done in an accountable fashion. But boy, oh boy, it's a tough problem, and I think it's the toughest problem for admissions committees.
For medical school.
For medical, because all of you guys are smart, and all of you can do really, really well on every test we give you. And it's hard to, and probably we don't do very well, it's hard to pick out of those pre-meds the best. But for me, if some applicant says to me, I read Lewis Thomas's books on thinking about biology while listening to Mahler's Fifth in the middle of the night. I was a humanities major at Columbia College. I created a humanities and medicine program at Mount Sinai. That's a quarter of our class. We don't believe that you need MCATs. We don't believe that you need organic chemistry. We think that there can be a function for liberal arts students in medicine, but we also believe that there's a function for SciMed, individuals who want to do the science that are so important to school. And those have to be accomplishments in both those areas.
You have to get a blend of students, I guess.
Well, I think that medicine requires a blend of those competences. As I said, it's going to be difficult providing care under the ACA. but it's also necessary to have the science.
Nathan, what's
do
ACA?
it.
The Affordable Care Act,
Affordable
Oh.
care.
otherwise
See,
known by the Republicans as Obamacare.
I really, that's a hateful term, because it has become a slur.
Yeah.
And it's almost become frankly racist, and I hate it. And I think it's darn wrong.
Well, Nathan, it's only going to take me 20 seconds, Peter. It may not help these students, but it's an unbelievable boon to his legacy, because I think that in 30 or 40 years, it's going to be looked at as a great moment in American history, and it's going to be attached to his name.
I'd like to answer the question.
Obama.
Oh,
Care.
yeah.
Yeah.
Obama care.
Yes.
But let's switch to this.
I'm sorry, Peter.
No.
I'm
What-
sorry.
What do you feel are the kinds of people who tend to do well?
Yeah, so I asked Vin Parnell, he's a friend of mine, he's a congenital heart surgeon. What do you think, we would tell young people interested in medicine? What should frighten some away? And he said, well, it takes a really long time. You can't just learn it quickly. I'm just looking at my colleagues who are highly specialized, Dr. Case included, and it's so with their lifelong love of learning. If you'd really rather learn something and then just go out and do it, and just relax and take life easy, if you want to have an identity as a doctor, you got to be in love with it. And it's fairly consuming, which raises another very important question about lifestyle matters and just how consuming is it, which those two might be able to address better than Nathan and I.
How would, here we have the people who are in the audience are younger people. They're either students at Yale or they're recently graduated. How do they figure that out? In other words, how does some of these people in the audience figure out whether that they have that?
Well, to me, I had majored in philosophy. I listened to these different Yale professors, read a bunch of books, and I figured out that things that were of value were hard to come by and difficult. I think Thomas Paine said the same thing, and things that are really of value take struggle and work. And to me, I felt that my concern was that I had no personal worth when I was graduating from Yale College in 1971. And that to feel like I was of value, if I could master medicine to the best of my ability, would take a great deal of work. And the bang for the buck would be that I would feel that I had personal value. And it worked. But it's ongoing, lifelong learning.
You had a role model. You knew
Correct.
the drudgery component of medicine.
Yeah, but my father just loved it. He just loved it. He never had a computer, but he had all his journals and he kept reading them.
But what he's saying is, you were in a special situation where someone you knew well and close to was a doctor.
Right.
And the problem, and that was wonderful because you figured it out, but for a lot of these folks, maybe their father or mother is a lawyer or whatever.
Well, so let me just tell them real quick.
Yeah.
You can help people who are suffering, and that gives you a sense of value, its purpose. And, you go to people who make vastly more money, where do you rub shoulders with them? At philanthropic events where they're trying to support the hospitals. And the glow of what you do rubs off on them, and, I'm appreciative of their beneficence.
Let's hear them. And then
Okay, here we go.
They have a.
So I'm a practical person, and I'm sure there are a lot of members in the audience who would like to have some practical tips. I would say, as much as I agree with everything you've said, I also just kind of want to bring us down to some basic concepts. I very much do believe, as corny as it sounds, that you gotta want to help people. I think it helps to have a love of science, but realize there are lots of different types of science. You don't necessarily have to be passionate about organic chemistry or a particular subject to be a great doctor. I still have this thought in my mind that had Peter spoken to two other physicians, perhaps, in a different subspecialty, perhaps he actually might have found a particular medical subspecialty that might have appealed to him. But, you can only live your life once when it comes to something that takes as long as medicine does. I love to use the analogy of long-distance running. I do have a marathoning history, and I think it works really well for the sense of delayed gratification. Now, there's a lot of instant gratification that comes with going to medical school, because you're not sitting there just making widgets. Every single day that you're in medical school and doing all of your rotations, you are building your character as well as your knowledge. You are taking, you're putting on that white jacket that they don on you at Yale Medical School. They have a beautiful ceremony for that. You're taking on the persona, and for goodness sakes, just make sure you do it right. Don't make the mistake of going to medical school and do a bad job of it and turn out to be someone that we're going to be embarrassed to know, honestly. I just don't want people who are going into it for the wrong reasons and who are going to be doing something horrible to patients or to each other. I just don't want you in medicine if you're going to be like that, honestly. But it's just such an incredible privilege. Remember, there are lots of different personalities that can be okay in medicine. I just want to reiterate once and again that there are so many different subspecialties. Don't think that there's just one prototype. Beyond making sure that you're truly compassionate and smart and willing to work really hard through all this, other than that, I think there is room for different personality types that can really work well within different specialties. The trick is figuring out what that is. And thank God we're in a country where you can change your mind along the way, but do it with kindness and do it with maturity, and don't burn any bridges along the way. Make sure that you make friends everywhere you go. You have only one chance to make a great first impression, so always do that. Work extremely hard, be an honest person, and you will figure it out. And if it turns out that medicine's not for you, there are lots of ways to parlay that same graduate training at whatever stage you change your mind into something else where that experience is not going to be for naught. And I really, really believe that. I am a very optimistic person. I just want to quickly add, this article was just hilarious. This Scott Adams in the Wall Street Journal. I do want to refer you to this. Fail Your Way to Success by him, October 13th. Couple things in here that I don't agree with at all, but thank God it turns out he's an optimistic person. So this is for people who are going into business, so there are some ways in which it seems very distinctly dissimilar to those of us who are in medicine. So I would refer you to this, and then email me later and let's talk about it. Okay, go ahead, Esther.
So a lot of things have already been said that I won't repeat, namely there being many different options within medicine, and we are only, like Dr. Lee said, a small sampling of all the different paths you can take. And the life of an academic pathologist who may never see a patient in his or her daily routine is very different from that of, say, or a person who does anesthesia for a private practice. There are just so many different options, and whatever you're looking for may not be the same as what someone else is looking for, but be aware of you might need to search a little more deeply, but there are a lot of different ways to be happy in medicine. I think Dr. Dolgen used the term lifestyle earlier, and I just wanted to touch on that. I think that, so I'm fairly junior, I'm in my fellowship, I finished my residency, I worked as a hospitalist for a year, which essentially just means I was working shifts in a hospital, which was a very good lifestyle in certain ways, because I made twice the amount of money that I did as a resident, and I worked less than half the time. I did nothing. I went on vacation, I went to Turkey, Australia, Thailand. This was in a 4-month period. And I paid off some of my loans, but I was honestly bored. By the end of it, I was really bored. So that's not for everyone. And that kind of job, there are people who work those jobs who love it because they're home with their kids, they're out at 4 o'clock, their hours are very predictable. So it really depends what you want now, and also where your life is going. I mean, what you want right now as an 18-year-old or 22-year-old may not be what your priorities are when you get a little older, and that's somewhat hard to predict. But I do know a lot of women, especially, who in medicine to some degree, and also in fields like the law, they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars going to graduate school. It takes a long time, it's expensive, it's hard, it's annoying, it's not fun at times, and realized several years into their career, I hate being a lawyer. I hate to say it, it does seem to happen more to the lawyers than to the doctors, but to some doctors too, and that is just the worst, because either you feel, oh well, I can't admit that I've wasted all this time, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing and be sort of dissatisfied forever, and that does happen, or you quit and okay, there goes $200,000 in 3 years of my life, 4 years of my life. So and a lot of people, I think, make that decision when maybe they've been working for a few years and they get kind of bored and they've been doing the same thing for a while, or when they get married and have families and they realize my kids are way more entertaining than any of the jobs I've ever had. And I just think that's something important to think about when you're talking about committing to many, many years and many thousands of dollars in tuition.
Now, I want to make sure that we have time for questions. So what I'd like to do now is skip the last question and go and really open it up to questions for the audience. So what I'd like to do is rotate a little bit through the venues, and let me start out with the Yale people. And Kristen, can you ask if there's someone who would like to ask a question?
Oh, that's me.
Hi. Does anybody have any questions?
No one has any. Are you sure these
Let's just go
are? Are
to
you
the
sure
next
these are
venue.
Yale students?
That's the next venue.
Just takes them a second to get going. Somebody has a
There's
question?
other webinar
Someone
questions.
who needs to sleep 3 hours a night, can you make it through medical school?
If you're someone who needs to sleep for 8 hours a night, can you make it through medical school?
I like these specific questions.
I want to answer that. I want to answer that. My mother always told me that of her 3 kids, I far and away needed the most amount of sleep. My brother and sister are attorneys. And when I fell in love with surgery, I was truly concerned about it. And I asked Rolando Sanchez, he was about 5'8", no fat on him, 210, had a beard. He looked like he could eat a live cow. And I said, Rolando, he was a surgery resident at Bellevue. I said, are you ever too tired to eat? And he said, yes, I've been too tired to eat. So I think I had a very realistic idea about it. I went into surgery because there was something in me that was driving me, and I had profound sleep deprivation for about a decade. I met my wife at that time, and she said that she was so interested when I finished my training, and we already had a child, to find out what I was like. She actually didn't really have a clue. And things have radically changed in terms of work hour restrictions.
Yeah.
So it is not as hellacious now as it was for me. So I'm going to say that being without sleep is not a fun thing. It shouldn't be the reason you go into it, but it's livable. What do you guys say?
Yeah, things changed a lot since my training years too. It was after my training years that the hours that you are on call, into the next day are restricted for medical students, as well as the residency training program, which you all know residency is after medical school. That's what's adding to those years of training.
I mean, you're still going to be tired. I was trained during these new regulations, and I once went to a bar with friends and fell asleep standing up talking, and kept talking while asleep to my friend, and she said, what are you saying? So, I mean, you will be tired, but I'm a wimp. I never thought I was the kind of person who could plow through and stay up for 30 hours, but I think you will surprise yourself
You'll get through
with
it.
your resiliency.
If you need to do it, you'll get through it.
Let me see, any questions here in New York? We're going to rotate through the venues. Anyone? But go ahead.
So I'm actually now a second-year medical student, and going in, I'm thankful to your HUMED program because I'm a HUMED. So going in,
Oh my.
you hear all this stuff about burnout and about sort of the loss of empathy among medical students, and it's sort of one of those things. I think this would be like a myth versus reality. The myth being that like you're different and like it's not going to happen to you. But I already know, like, I sometimes see it in myself, I see it in my friends, I see it in my third-year friends especially, the sort of like almost anger with patients for making the medical students, be up at 4 and all that other stuff. And I'm wondering if you guys have any sort of like very like specific habits or tricks or ideas of things that you do every day that sort of remind you, like, why you went into what you do, or whether you have any sort of habits like that that sort of keep you from burning out.
What a great question.
Now I'm worried.
Did they hear the question in New Haven?
Did everyone hear the question? what do you do?
Well, do you guys have the answer? Does anybody have the answer?
Medical school's a tough time. No, it's a really tough time. You're bottom of the totem pole, maybe a little bit beyond, above a college student who might be shadowing someone, but it's a stressful time. You don't have a whole lot of autonomy, maybe none, and yet you're being scrutinized by everyone. And so you gotta just be mindful that this is happening, try not to. There are gonna be situations when, as we were saying earlier, that there are gonna be patients who are not really cooperative. Why are we taking care of them? So there might be situations like that sometimes, especially on the vascular service, because I did my internship in surgery. But you'll get through that. But I think it does take a mindfulness of it. If there are humanities courses that are being taught over the course of your medical, then that's definitely improvement from the past. Because you're right, this is a part of your character that you certainly do not want to let go. But I think that you will recapture that when you are in your chosen subspecialty, because you suddenly will be experiencing the joys and the gratification that you've been looking for. But medical school's a stressful time.
We have here a question from the streaming video audience, and this is a question from Kate. And she says, I've been volunteering in an ER for a pre-med program, and have had more than 5 doctor residents tell me that they regret their choice of career, and not to become a doctor, but to go on to Wall Street, where I am. The implication is that due to changes in healthcare, doctors will no longer earn such high salaries, and more discouragingly, that the current crop of residents only went into the profession because they expected to earn a lot of money, and by extension, respect. So the question is, any thoughts from Kate?
I was never motivated by money, that's for sure.
I think that's what I tried to describe as one of the myths or misimpressions. If you think you're going to be rich, or that is your motivation, don't be a physician.
And by the way, don't go to Wall Street anymore either. I will tell you, the myth about Wall Street has changed, so don't go into it.
Now, one thing, look, Kate has 5 people telling her this. So let's assume Kate has her own personal exaggeration factor is 2. So then she knows 2 or 3 people have said this. It's still a reality. And I know that there are people in medicine who go around saying this. And I am going to take the liberty of saying that they've failed in their careers. They have not found satisfaction. Now, what Peter would say is what correlated? What correlated? So you told me when I asked you this the other day, Dr. Case, that you weren't sure they were all that serious when they said it. People sort of like to say things like that to young people, which to me is like really mean and stupid. But look, if your goal is to get filthy rich, it's really pretty stupid to have patients in the way. You should do something else. But the doctors are on poverty lines, on poverty lines, and you can only drive 1 car at a time.
But I guess the message is, if you're looking for money, there are easier. I guess the summary is, if you're looking for money, there are easier ways to make a lot of money.
No, it's the wrong way to go into medicine.
Yeah, wrong way.
But
Yeah,
I think it's easy to discount these unnamed ER physicians that Kate was talking to and say, well, don't go into it for the money. I mean, yes, that's definitely true, but I think I'd be curious to know, well, why are these people unhappy, and kind of learn from that experience. Was there more to it? The money, or maybe they tried to go into another specialty and didn't get a spot, or maybe they just are in a institution that's overwhelmed and there's way too much on their plates. I mean, I think it would be too easy to exactly. I wouldn't want to write them off as, oh, well, they're unhappy because they wanted to be rich. That was dumb. I mean,
it's kind of a crowd mentality when you got. Were they all having the same conversation at one time? I just really think it's important to sample broadly and widely, right? Every single person you meet, ask them. You are going to see people and hear people say, especially I do a lot of nonprofit work with the American Cancer Society, and I continue to feel the most sad for the medical oncologists who have patients who are very complicated, and they've only got 5 minutes to spend with them, and so people who probably could imagine themselves practicing for another 10 years are feeling more of an urge to stop because it's just become insurmountable with the pressures and undermining the gratification that has been helping to sustain their, their good feelings all along. It's hard to feel like you're making a difference when you're cut, when the time that you're able to spend with patients is cut down that much. So,
But it is true that this may be a symptom of the larger uncertainty of what
the future holds.
Obamacare will mean to the practice of medicine.
You mean ACA?
ACA. I smirked. I hope that was visible in New Haven. There's a legitimate anxiety over the role of physician and the loss of that special contact with patients.
I will say the one thing I do know is that the ACA will create a much greater demand for general practitioners, just by the nature of what is trying to do.
And all
And there is a
healthcare.
shortage in all healthcare, but particularly general practice, because
Yes.
it depends very heavily on having doctors who take care of people in the front lines.
And who
So-
are dedicated to prevention.
Right. Kristen, asked if there are any questions from New Haven. There we go.
Oh,
There's
yeah,
one.
I have
There's a
a
guy. Okay, go ahead.
My question's for Dr. Lee, and I'm wondering,
Can I see? Can I see?
was there something about psychiatry, about the field that turned you away from it?
Was there something about the field of psychiatry that turned Dr. Lee away from it?
Could I see the person who's asking the question? Do you mind coming into the visual field?
Field of psychiatry
Her answer may be different depending on what you look like.
Radiologist.
Oh, there we go. All right. Okay,
Thank
there's
you.
the
Well,
guilty
nice to
part.
meet you. Psychiatry is,
She's waving at you.
I think of psychiatry is perhaps probably the most challenging profession in the sense that mental health can be the most tenuous. And as someone who was already anticipating having a family, and I know I'm thin-skinned, I don't think that's ever changed, I just couldn't imagine having a practice at any stage of my career where somebody's going to be calling me about to jump off of a building, and I would have to go and talk to him or her. I just couldn't go that far. And by the way, you're kind of dealing with kind of within normal range psychopathology every single day anyway, in so-called normal people. We get enough of that no matter what you do. So in any case, my career path was I then considered neurology, I then considered neurosurgery. I was looking into surgery in general because it's very active and physical and direct and concrete. My surgical internship was when I really gained appreciation for how far-reaching radiology is. And again, back to my particular field, is very, very much intense direct patient contact in a good way. So that's my quick path trajectory. But I have the utmost respect for psychiatrists. None of this is at all meant to be demeaning. But it's a field that has its own issues in some ways in terms of the role between psychiatrists. Are they mainly medicating, or do they even have time now to do all the psychoanalysis and the other that they need to do? So a whole nother topic that I can't talk about.
Dr. Dolgen would like to comment.
Medical students oftentimes won't share with people what their dreams are in terms of a specialty, because anytime you mention a career, it's very easy for any of us to say why it wasn't right for us. I could make sarcastic comments about any one of our fields. So, if you have a dream, keep in mind there's more force to that dream than what any of us can say.
Exactly. You were saying that.
Precisely. It's not
Explore it
the
honestly.
Any questions here in your, here we go. Go ahead.
What do you think the pros and cons are between being an MD and another healthcare professional, or even a dentist, or what kind of made you choose MD?
I know one of the nurse practitioners she's been a nurse practitioner for a very long time, and she told me when I was a resident, she said, I feel sorry for you guys. You got suckered into getting an MD, and I essentially do the same thing. And she gets, she's been there a while, she gets paid a decent salary, and she went through not have as much the schooling and commitment and everything. So, there are PAs, there are NPs, there are other avenues. So I think people do forget about those.
Yeah, and that's why I mentioned it early on, and I'm glad it's coming up again. I mean, I think we tend to have a natural bias. Well, first of all, we're all MDs on the panel, and this is the way the panel was designed. But this is such a great opportunity, and I especially am excited because this is IA-approved panel, and Asians are notorious for upholding certain subspecialties as being sort of the premier and considered successful. But we have to make sure that Asian faces are represented across the board. All these jobs in healthcare are legitimate, valid, and jobs that you can be proud of if you're doing it right. And just because you happen to be Yale affiliated doesn't mean at all that you should be ever thinking that anything's a step down. So I just want to make sure you're hearing it now and saying it again, over and over again. None of these things are going to be a lesser choice. And in fact, I think one comment I was going to say is that if you end up going to an Ivy League medical school, I don't think anyone's going to discriminate against you on the basis of that, but it's certainly not necessary to be a great doctor or a great nurse or a great any of these things. And PA, the Physician's Associate / Assistant program, is a fantastic way to get a lot of the same gratification with a faster path, less time investment, less money investment. So no matter what you do for your choice, make sure you're going in with your eyes wide open about cost, about investment, and really what it is that you're seeking. Now, if you're going to be a PA, it's sort of very special opportunities where you might be as autonomous as the doctor. You're working still officially under. So you'd have to really, really be seeking that if that's how high-powered you are, but it is possible. And same with RNs and Ps. So the healthcare profession continues to be evolving.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize what Dr. Lee said, which is, she said 2 or 3 times, which is, don't go by what this particular group is, because there's so many different segments of not only the medical profession, the healthcare generally. And one piece of advice I would give to anyone who's at Yale or went to Yale, there are a tremendous number of Yale alumni who will, even if they don't know you, but if you call them and say, look, I'm graduated from Yale, or I'm a junior at Yale, whatever, can I have 30 minutes to talk to you? Who will don't give you the time to talk to you about it. So what I encourage you is
Tap
to
into that.
go to, find someone who's a physician assistant or someone who's, or a dentist or whatever, and talk to people, enough people, because at the end of the day, they're going to have a far more valuable opinion about what it's like. And they might also be able to answer questions about, dentist versus doctor and so forth in a very meaningful way. But I encourage you, and that's one of the benefits of being at the school that you are, which is this huge group of alumni. And it's incredible how generous these people are, right? And there are easy ways to be able to figure out who is a dentist or so forth who went to Yale. But I would encourage you to do that because all the other stuff, reading, it's very hard to get an accurate view. Any other questions from New Haven? Is there another question?
Yeah, one more.
Okay.
This is for the more indecisive of us. I'm wondering, practically speaking, when is it too late to decide whether medicine is right for you?
Never.
In the lifelong career?
When is it too late to decide that medicine is right for you?
You would know because you have people at the your medical school.
Oh, it's never too late.
Yeah.
There is a practical element to that decision, that is the length of time it takes to train. But you can calculate perhaps how much time you'd have left over after that very, very lengthy period.
So you don't recommend in your 90s to the same doctor, right?
No, that's true. But this is the point. I think we need to encourage second careers in medicine because those individuals have gone through some of the vicissitudes of life that a very keen post-adolescent can only assess empirically by self-judgment, and that ain't enough. I find that in my career that the returning veterans were extraordinary in their contribution to my education as a younger person, but also to their approach to their field and to their
Right,
patients.
and appreciation.
So it's not a barrier. You got to be smart. You have to be able to convince people of your intentions and your commitment, but that's true for everything. I encourage second careers.
I think there was a question here in New York.
Yeah, I had a question about another possible myth. One thing you see on TV shows is people like coming in and doctors ordering tests with just abandon. They'll order like 17 tests at once. I wonder how often in your like course of treatment do financial decisions or decisions about how your treatment will hold up in an insurance claim decide how you proceed?
Or liability, right?
Or liability.
Or liability,
Clinical
right.
decision.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think
Tests
my
and things.
Yeah.
experience is really generalizable, honestly. I work at Montefiore Medical Center. It's an academic institution. It's in the Bronx, and it's, I think, unique in the sense that our patient population is generally very poor. A lot of them either have Medicaid or no insurance. Many of them are recent immigrants who may not have, the documents. They don't know how to work the system, and it really never comes up. I mean, all of our, and I think, New York is a special place, and pediatrics is also, I think, a little bit different. So I don't think this is true everywhere, but it really never comes up. It doesn't matter where you're from, what kind of insurance you have or don't have, we'll see you in the clinic. I don't know how the hospital stays in business, I really don't, but it just, we order everything, we do everything. We treat kids with cancer, treat kids, with chemotherapy and surgery and radiation who came from a plane, came off a plane from the Dominican Republic or Africa, 24 hours ago, and I don't know who pays for it. I mean, I guess the system does, but yeah, I don't know how it happens, but
Your question might have to do with a very specialized situation. So, and I don't watch any TV. So if you're talking about episodes of the ER when someone's coming in as a major full body trauma, then there are going to be a lot of tests that are quickly ordered, fast and furious and necessary. But as a broader question, I think your question is very interesting and very mature of you, because it's the type of question that normally doesn't enter to the radar for most people until you get into maybe a private practice, where you're really having to account for all costs. But we are all having to be more accountable about costs. That is very much a part of the political and social and professional landscape right now. There's very intense scrutiny about all that.
Well, what's wrong with getting an unnecessary test? There are a number of things wrong with getting an unnecessary test. Some of them can be very dangerous, but one of the things wrong with it is the expense. So if you order an expensive test, the onus is on you to make sure it's appropriate and indicated. And that's drummed into people in training.
Right now, I dare say we order too many tests. Quite apart from the cost issue, it probably clutters the thinking, and it's cover your backside. And in that line, I think it is unfortunately true. There still is a great deal of defensive medicine in terms of malpractice liability, particularly in obstetrics. And I think it is not the major, but certainly a contributing cause to the unnecessarily high cesarean section rates that we face.
Now, we've gone over time, but for a good cause. I think there have been some really wonderful questions that all of you have asked, and I know there's still some more. But I want to say now that it's 20 past, and I'm respectful everyone's time, and I know the dining rooms are only open for so long at Yale, right? So I want to just, pardon me, I want to.
Peter, they can email any of us, Dr. Case included. The
Okay,
students
well,
can email any of
What
us.
I'll do is first of all, I want to really thank the panelists. I mean, it has been really wonderful. It's been a great panel, and I think you obviously can tell that they love being doctors, but also I think they were, honest about the challenges and so forth. And so I want all of us should thank the panelists for doing a great job. But I also want to thank all of you, because we have a very attentive audience. You've had some really wonderful questions. What we will do is, if any of the panelists who are willing to have their email shared with you, I will ask them, and if so, we have a way to email you and let you know that if you have questions, how you can email these people. But I'll let them choose whether they want to get emails from all of you. But thank you all very much. And for those of you who are deciding between the education profession and medical school, we hope to see you on November 11th.
I wanted to say that I think it's always fascinating to go to all these things that you didn't think you would have interest in. So if they're already in the process of making all these fun panels and you guys are available to come, then you should. You just never know what you'll learn, and somehow it kind of might somehow impact on your thinking about something. And then one other thing I just wanted to quickly mention, I already mentioned here to Angela, I don't typically, just like I don't typically watch TV, I don't typically read anything about the Asian American experience, but I happen to have read this book, and I just thought it was really a great book that helped me understand myself a little bit better, verbalized in concrete terms. So I just thought it was interesting. It's certainly not something that only Asian Americans can read. It's open to you too. But I do think that it helps me understand a little bit better about, for me, the context in which I felt this desire to go into medicine and why it felt like a natural fit to me. But it goes far beyond that. So anyway, this is this book.
Well, thank you all, and enjoy your evenings.
Can you still hear us?
Yeah.
What was the name of the book?
Yeah, they couldn't read it.
So it's Tiger Writing by Gish Jen. Did I say it right?
Tiger Writing.
Tiger Writing. So in some ways it's sort of like the antithesis of the battle hymn of the Tiger Mom. Did any of you guys read that? I had to read it only because people kept asking me about it. But it's not the way I live.
Kristen, thank you. Kristen, thank you very much.